Happy 2024! We're going to do a comparison of the photo and video related capabilities of the iPhone 15 Pro Max and the Galaxy S23 Ultra, as both smartphones have somewhat matured and as some of you may be weighing their smartphone options this year with the Galaxy S24 around the corner. Make sure to take advantage of timestamps as we're going to address many different categories, and make sure to subscribe to my channel to not miss any future content. Both smartphones feature a 13mm equivalent ultra-wide angle camera with 12 megapixels and an aperture of f2.2, and the ultra-wide angle lenses on both smartphones allow for capturing macro photos as well. The Galaxy S23 Ultra features a 200 megapixel f1.8 camera, whereas the iPhone 15 Pro Max features a 48 megapixel f1.78 camera. When it comes to the telephoto lenses, the Galaxy has a 3x 10 megapixel 70mm f2.4 equivalent lens and also a 10x 10 megapixel f4.9 lens, and the iPhone simply has one 12 megapixel 120mm f2.8 equivalent lens. When it comes to macro photography, I give both smartphones a tie. You can get very close with both smartphones, and the way the images are processed simply differ, so it's up to you to decide which one is better. When shooting in decent lighting conditions, it's fair to say that the iPhone is sharper and clearer than the Galaxy when shooting up to 2.9 times zoom, and once the Galaxy's 3x optical zoom kicks in, the Galaxy takes the lead up to 4.9 zoom, and once we hit 5x zoom until 9.9 zoom, the iPhone takes sharper images. And finally, anything above 10x zoom, the Galaxy clearly beats the iPhone. One of my happiest highlights of 2023 was being able to get a closer shot of Lionel Messi, thanks to the Galaxy's amazing zoom capabilities. It's quite incredible. So, you could argue that the iPhone produces better images in standard zoom range. However, the Galaxy is stronger when it comes to telephoto capabilities. But the conversation changes somewhat when we evaluate the low-light performance of both smartphones. In my comparison, the Galaxy's wide angle and main camera seem to capture and process the images a little bit better than the iPhone. The Galaxy's main camera does have a slightly wider aperture than the iPhone's main camera, so this doesn't surprise me. However, once we get into the telephoto range where the Galaxy in proper lighting had the upper hand, the iPhone suddenly performs better than the Galaxy even at times 10 zoom and above, and this is probably due to the Galaxy's periscope lens having an aperture of f4.9 and the iPhone's ×5 telephoto lens having an aperture of f2.8. Since dynamic range is very important when it comes to image quality, I have prepared two comparisons. In our first comparison here to the left, we have a regular automatically adjusted photo taken with the Galaxy, and on the right we have a regular photo taken with the iPhone. As you can see, the Galaxy does create more contrasts and a more saturated look. And this is why the iPhone does preserve more dynamic range straight out of the smartphone. This is also very noticeable here when we look at the shadows, just because the look of the iPhone is a bit more balanced. It does preserve the detail in the highlights and the shadows a bit better. In our second dynamic range comparison, let's compare maximum raw resolution photos of each smartphone and apply some adjustments ourselves. The Galaxy can capture 200 megapixel JPEGs, but the maximum raw resolution that the Galaxy can capture is 50 megapixel when using the Expert RAW app. And the iPhone can enable and capture 48 megapixel RAWs when shooting with ×1 zoom. To demonstrate that this comparison is fair, let's take a look at the histogram of each photo. The exposures are quite similar, so this comparison is fair. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a preset where I open up the shadows all the way and slightly decrease the highlights. And I'm going to apply this preset to both of these photos. Well, it's very easy to conclude that the iPhone is very much beating the Galaxy when it does come to dynamic range. Just simply look at these shadow areas. The iPhone was able to preserve the dynamic range, whereas the Galaxy is completely falling apart. But what is also very important to point out is that the Galaxy is looking much sharper and is capturing the greater resolution. Just look at each and every part of this image. The Galaxy does beat the iPhone when it comes to resolution. And once again, the Galaxy can capture 200 megapixel JPEGs, which we're not looking at right here. This is once again the 50 megapixel raw file captured with the Galaxy, and to the right we have a 48 megapixel RAW from the iPhone. The iPhone very much beats the Galaxy when it comes to dynamic range, but the Galaxy is stronger when it comes to full resolution and sharpness. Both the Galaxy and the iPhone allow you to adjust your depth of field even after a photo is captured, which is phenomenal. However, the iPhone takes everything a step further and allows you to even adjust the focus point after you capture your portraits. The Galaxy once again creates a richer contrast and more saturation, and the iPhone creates a more balanced look. And while everyone can decide which smartphone creates better portraits as it is subjective, no one can deny the pro-level portrait look that the ×5 zoom of the iPhone's portrait modes can create. It is simply stunning. Both the Galaxy and the iPhone feature 12 megapixel 4K 60 fps selfie cameras, but the iPhone selfie camera has a wider 23mm equivalent f1.9 lens, whereas the Galaxy has a 26mm equivalent f2.2 lens. Both selfie cameras offer various effects when taking selfies. I personally like the Galaxy's blur retouch effect, and on the iPhone I like the contour light effect. But once again, given how both smartphones process their images and portraits differently, there is some personal taste involved. But the iPhone selfie camera is wider, and given the additional flexibility that you have on the iPhone after taking your shots, I would have to say that taking selfies with the iPhone is a greater experience than on the Galaxy. Long exposure, night sky, or astrophotography, whatever you want to call it, both of these smartphones produce incredible results. But if I had to choose one smartphone over the other, I would have to choose the iPhone, as it does produce clear images and it captures greater exposure in my experience once we get into long exposure territory. Both the Galaxy and the iPhone can capture great quality videos and also support 10-bit format. The Galaxy boasts tremendous 8K 30 FPS, while the iPhone boasts ProRes 4K 30 FPS, and when using a compatible external storage device, ProRes up to 4K 60 FPS. While 8K has 4 times the resolution of 4K and allows for a lot of flexibility when it comes to cropping your image, I think most video professionals will be more interested in Apple's ProRes format, as it is more suitable for professional post-processing. The iPhone supports a beautiful cinematic mode up to 4K 30 FPS HDR at ×1 and ×2 zoom, and the Galaxy's most comparable modes to cinematic modes would be the portrait video mode, where you can also shoot 4K 30 FPS with various effects, however no HDR, and the iPhone also allows once again for more flexibility with depth of field after you record your footage, so the iPhone wins this category as well. In my harsh low-light video comparison, the Galaxy is very noisy and the iPhone simply handles low-light video better. It's not even close. Both smartphones switch to their wide-angle lenses once you switch to action modes on the iPhone or super steady on the Galaxy. The iPhone captures a greater resolution at 2.8K and 60 frames per second, whereas the Galaxy has a slightly low resolution but also supports 60 frames per second. During the wide-angle shots, I think both smartphones are equally good, but once you switch to ×1 zoom on both smartphones, I think the iPhone starts to perform better. And the iPhone also supports ×2 zoom and ×5 zoom, whereas the Galaxy only supports up to ×1 zoom. So this category I would have to give to the iPhone. The iPhone supports slow-mo videos with all of its lenses at Full HD and 240 frames per second, and the slow-mo videos turn out great. The Galaxy also supports Full HD and 240 frames per second in its slow motion mode, but also a crazy 960 frames per second, also at Full HD in its super slow-mo mode. However, the Galaxy is limited to its primary camera only when it comes to slow motion video. So you could give a tie in this category, as both smartphones have their pros and cons, but speaking about slow motion ability alone, the Galaxy is superior thanks to the much higher frames per second. I love time-lapse photography, and I appreciate that both the Galaxy and the iPhone have a time-lapse mode. On the iPhone, you select your zoom and then adjust the exposure, but you're limited to only 1080p. Shockingly, the iPhone does not create 4K time-lapses, which in my opinion makes no sense. But the Galaxy will allow you to capture 4K time-lapses, and you have additional settings like choosing different time-lapse speeds for different types of subjects. The autofocus works great on both smartphones, but once we enter low-light scenarios, the Galaxy's autofocus appears to take longer than the iPhone's. So I'd have to choose the iPhone as the winner in this category. And before we forget, as you're listening to me speak, you should be able to hear my laptop fans. I turned them up on purpose. This is the audio from the iPhone. And this is the audio from the Galaxy. I think the Galaxy is a bit more aggressive with the background noise reduction. And while the audio quality on both the iPhone and the Galaxy are pretty decent under normal circumstances, I do recommend for more professional audio quality to buy one of these external wireless microphone systems like the Rode wireless systems. You simply plug them into your smartphone via USB-C and you're good to go, and you can capture videos with much better audio quality. If you're interested, make sure to check out my review on the Rode Wireless Go 2 system here on my channel. So in conclusion, I would have to say that the iPhone 15 Pro Max is the overall better and more consistent performer than the Galaxy S23 Ultra when it purely comes to photo and video quality and flexibility. And this conclusion can only be drawn given the better dynamic range of the iPhone, given the incredible ProRes formats when capturing video on the iPhone, and also the better overall low light performance, also when considering using different lenses and different zoom ranges. And before anybody calls me an Apple fanboy, you should know that I've been a Galaxy user since the dawn of time. And despite purchasing the iPhone 15 Pro Max, the Galaxy S23 Ultra still remains my main smartphone, given that I'm simply an Android user. But of course, the Galaxy also has its strong points, like the incredible optical zoom, the time-lapse mode, or slow motion video. But given that the iPhone 15 Pro Max is the overall better photo and video performer, I find myself taking the iPhone with me wherever I go. I don't think the question should be which smartphone is better than the other. To put it simply, both smartphones are incredible, both for capturing photos and videos, but for more professional use, the iPhone is objectively the better performer for both photos and videos. But if you, for example, go to a lot of sports events, given the incredible optical zoom of the Galaxy, you might want to consider getting the Galaxy. If you're an iPhone user, you might be asking yourself, is it worth upgrading to the iPhone 15 Pro Max? If you have an iPhone 14 Pro, it might not make sense upgrading to the iPhone 15 Pro, but if you have anything before an iPhone 14, it might make sense to upgrade to the iPhone 15 Pro. And if you're a Galaxy user, it might make sense upgrading to the S23 Ultra, given that the S24 is right around the corner and we could probably expect a price drop for the S23 Ultra. If you found my detailed comparison useful and you're interested in buying one of these two smartphones, please consider using my Amazon links down below, as it would help me and my channel greatly. And as always, if you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to let me know in the comment section down below. And once again, I wish you all a happy new year.